Hello and welcome back. There's something on my mind that I've been wanting to talk about and I've done a ton of research about, and that is for the ratings of The Challenge Season 37. Now, while filming this, we had just made it past the 6th episode of The Challenge Season 37, and I have to say that it's been taking a hit not only from fans, but it's also taking a hit in the ratings. If you're a casual viewer of the challenge, you may not know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at this line graph that I made, because I'm addicted to Excel, of the ratings and the viewership per episode of the Challenge 37 so far. Take a look at episode 4's dot. That's the historical low rating ever that has happened on the challenge. To get some context, let's look at a few other line graphs of ratings from some past seasons of the challenge. Now, I went and did my research. I went as far back to get as many ratings as possible, and I was able to get all the way back to season 19's episodes ratings, all the way up to this current season's ratings. So let's take a look at Cutthroat, Rivals, X's, Free Agents, Vendettas, War of the Worlds, Double Agents, and the current season of the challenge, Spies, Lies, and Allies. When taking a look at all these line graphs separately, it may not give the full context, so let's put them all on the same graph, and here we can get sort of the full picture. Now, this is only 8 seasons for a sample size, and I do want to mention that if you take a look at the Rivals, Cutthroat, and X's graphs, that was sort of in a different era where appointment television is not necessarily a thing much of anymore, with cord cutters, and everything is so much more accessible nowadays with streaming services. You can go on MTV.com on the internet, and you can view the episodes on demand. Now, speaking of streaming services, why MTV can we not watch the most recent season of the challenge on Paramount Plus as it's going on? Like, Big Brother puts their episodes on the next day. So why can't that be a thing for the challenge? But I think that reason is us dropping the bucket for what I think are more deep-rooted issues that is happening here, and is the pattern that we're seeing for the challenge. What I'm talking about, let's take a look real quick at this graph that I made for the average viewers per season. So this is all the ratings per episode taken into account and then divided by the total number of episodes. But you can see that there is this like downward trajectory that happens since Rivals 2 and kind of like puddles out and is kind of just hovering around the 0.75 and 0.85 total, where back in the day, we're getting 1.47 and hitting over the 1 million viewership mark. Why is this trend happening? One major criticism that the fandom has on the Challenge Season 37 is that the cast is made up of a lot of players in their first season. There's so many newbies from all different shows, from all different countries on this season, that a lot of the fandom in the US have no idea who these players are and are wondering, why should we get invested in these new players? Are they going to come back? Are they going to be a force to be reckoned with for seasons to come? I think this critique is valid, but I think it's also a topsoil type of way of thinking about it, because I went back and did some research and I took notes of every single player, of when they were introduced on the challenge, how many seasons that they've done, and then I took an average of the career span or the season span of that certain class of rookies or players that were introduced, to get an idea of how much that the challenge has invested in players and that cast. I would consider Spies, Lies, and Allies being a wave, and what I mean by that is that a wave is when the challenge makes up a cast and majority of that cast is of new players, and I would say like around 50% or higher of a cast being of players being in their first season. There have been 5 waves that have happened on the challenge in its history, not including Spies, Lies, and Allies. And the first wave we see happen on the challenge comes in Fresh Meat, of course, where 67% of that cast was made up of players in their first season. The big names on that cast were Wes, Kenny, DM, Evelyn, Evan, Big Easy, just to name a few, and the average season span of that whole rookie class was 4.8, close to 5 seasons. That's actually really high, and just saying those names, those are some heavy hitters on the challenge. Those players have had fans, they've had haters, they've had people root against them and for them, and it's because we got so invested with them. We had so much time with them. Wave 2, Fresh Meat 2. 58% of that cast was made up of players in their first season, with the notable names of Cara, Teresa, and Laurel, and the average season span of that whole cast was around 3.4 seasons. A significant drop from Fresh Meat, but there's still a lot of heavy hitters that were on that season, and it's important as we're moving on to season 20 and into the 20s and on that we have a new batch of players to get invested with and to root for or against. Wave 3 comes only 4 seasons after Fresh Meat 2, and that is in Battle of the Seasons 2012, where around 47% of the cast were players in their first season. This was the Rookie Revolution, helmed by Frank and the Team San Diego to get out the vets of Team Austin and Team Fresh Meat. Notable players that were introduced on this season were Nani, Zach, Jemmy, and Marie, and the average career span was 3.53. Not as many players to go against the average, but still 3.53 is a really good career span. Wave 4 happens 4 seasons after, where it was Battle of the Bloodlines, where 63% of the cast was made up of first season players. Notable names in this group were Corey, Tony, Dario. All 3 were on real world seasons. So when taking a look at just the bloodlines, only one bloodline made it onto more than 2 seasons, and that was Nicole, Nani's cousin, who did 4 seasons. The average career span on this season was only 2.2. Now this is the point I want to mention, that the challenge is taking a huge risk, having their season being on the backs of these players, this cast, where majority of these players are unknown to anybody, yet they don't even invest in them. They don't even bring them back, give them a shot to go through more seasons, to make us invested. They just toss them to the side and go, well, I guess we'll just restart and do it all over again, which they do when they come onto War of the Worlds Season 33, where we have 53% of the cast made up of first season players. This was essentially a Fresh Meat, but with people that were already established on other reality shows. Notable names in this cast was Josh, Theo, Turbo. The average career span on this batch of first season players, 1.83, less than 2 seasons. Some of the players came back for season 34, and even less came back to do Total Madness. There's something happening with the casting department, whether they are bringing on people that they aren't confident enough to keep on bringing back to do more seasons to make the audience get to know and invest. They're not rotating enough with the players that have already been on the show, and now they're not even wanting to call them anymore. The past few seasons, we've had the same players on over and over and over again. So we've seen the same drama happening over and over again. It's like we're seeing a rerun of last season and the season before that and the season before that. And this is one of the more deep-rooted issues that I'm hearkening on, is that the challenge in their history have leaned so heavy on their big names of Cara, of CT, of Bananas, that they haven't rotated a ton of the other cast members on it, or they felt so easy to just drop players that have just done 1 season and just move on to a whole new batch of rookies. And this is where they're playing behind the 8 ball, because now they're hitting a hard reset, not only once after Battle of the Seasons or Battle of the Bloodlines or War of the Worlds, to now having a fully brand new set of rookies for Spies, Lies, and Allies, but now they don't have the big names to help pass the torch onto the new era. Fresh Meat worked out so well because there was those aging vets. There were those people that wanted to do something else with their lives than being on the challenge for over 20 seasons, that they had to flood in, and they did a great job casting and bringing that cast back. How are we supposed to get invested with the new Cara, with the new Bananas, with the new Evelyns, who were out on their first episodes on their seasons, but were given the opportunity to come back, to show what they got, to show how they were able to evolve within the cast, within the seasons, to become beasts at what they do, to become beasts within the game. We're not getting that chance at all with any of the past seasons' rookies. Case in point comes from last season. We had 10 players in their first season. We come to this season and only 2 from that cast was brought back. Now I put that 2 players came back in a big asterisk because only 1 rookie was brought back to be a part of the original cast, which was Nam, who was out in episode 1, and then Amber came in as a replacement in episode 2. If Amber never came in as a replacement, we would have had none of those rookies coming back on this season of the challenge. Those rookies made up a third of your cast last season, yet none of them were given the shot to come back. One last factoid I want to mention in the cast portion is that from Dirty 30 to Spies, Lies, and Allies, with the players that were introduced in between that time, only a handful have done 4 or more seasons. Those players are Kyle, Tori, Cam, Josh, and Big T. That's it. Those are the players that were introduced and were given the most opportunities to keep returning for us to get involved and invested in. That's it. There's been so many players introduced since that time, yet that's all we've gotten. Now let's go back to the ratings and try to see if we can come up with a pattern or see a pattern happening. And let's start off talking about the waves. And unfortunately, I couldn't go all the way back to see what happened in season 12 Fresh Meat, but we can start things off by checking out what happened in Fresh Meat 2, as it has a season average viewership of 1.2 million people. As you can tell, it was lower than the next 4 seasons averages, and then it takes a huge, monstrous fall to the next wave that happens, which was Battle of the Seasons, season 23. And so we can tell here that, okay, we're getting these waves, and when there's normally a wave of new players, the ratings could be down because the audience is a little bit more skeptical. Maybe they're a little bit more cautious on getting wrapped up in a season that they don't know a ton of the players from. Rivals 2, things bounce back, but then here we are, Free Agents hits a low point. Why is a season that many of the audience would deem as a top tier season taking a huge hit in the ratings? The name makes things sound more skeptical and more vague when it's Free Agents. What is a free agent? Yes, it's a solo season, and it's kind of like a sports term to talk about a player who does not have an official team, but it's a lot more vague when you put it up to seasons with names like Rivals. And what's even more shocking that Free Agents has a pretty low viewer rating is that it's one of the last times in the challenge history that the viewership was averaging over 1 million viewers for a season. As we can see in X's 2, the next season, there's a drastic fall, and I think this is more on the timing of the season and where they time slotted it for, as it was on now Tuesday nights at 11 p.m. Absolutely a terrible time slot. And this brings us to our next wave, Battle of the Bloodlines. They moved it back to its normal time slot after X's 2 kind of bombed out with the ratings. They moved it back, made Battle of the Bloodlines, and that was even worse. This season held the worst ratings for the challenge until Spies, Lies, and Allies came to be. And for the next few seasons, it would just hover. It would hover around the 0.76, 0.8 type of vibe until we get to Total Madness and Double Agents. There was quite a bit of a spike, but you also have to remember what the world was going through in that time frame. This was during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic. Sports was canceled. Schools were having to be at home. Work was being at home. Everyone was just sitting at home waiting for something new to happen, new content, as everything was shutting down. And the challenge was the newest kid on the block, and everybody was sitting down on Wednesday nights to watch the challenge. And the same thing happened for Double Agents. We were still in the pandemic. There were still a lot of restrictions. And so when Double Agents came on, there was still a ton of viewers. But now sports are back. Things are coming on. Content is abundant now in this time frame, and we have some of the lowest ratings we've ever had on the challenge. They basically had a full year to themselves. They had 2 seasons with higher viewership than they've had in the past few years. Yet when we come to a new season, they can't even hold on to some of those new viewers to the newest season. And there's no problem with this time slot, with this time of year. It's 8 p.m. on Wednesdays. This is the time slot of all time slots. You're going up against primetime heavy hitters, and the heaviest of all primetime reality competition shows are coming back very, very soon in Survivor, who are ratings gold in this Wednesday's 8 p.m. time slot, where it is hitting well over 1 million views. And yes, there are people who watch either show but don't watch the same, but there has to be an overlap. And I only mention that because in the past few seasons, more Survivor players have been brought on to the challenge, and the challenge wouldn't do that if there wasn't already some interest. That on the Venn diagram, that there was a significant part of the audience that liked both the challenge and Survivor. So with Survivor coming back from a long hiatus, the longest it's been in its history of the show for a while, it is coming back, and it is coming to reclaim the Wednesday 8 p.m. time slot. I have to think that the challenge is shaking in its boots. Now, I mentioned for free agents that the naming convention of the season was a little bit more vague. It was a little bit more of a sports tip-off than being a little bit more focused and transparent with saying rivals and battle of the X's. And this plays into my next point of naming conventions and format for a season, that when things get too complex, audiences seem to be a little bit more restricted in or cautious when trying to get into a new season of the challenge. Free Agents was really a kickoff to this whole bigger than life naming conventions with Free Agents, Battle of the Bloodlines. They would briefly go back to Rivals 3, but after that season, it went directly to Invasion of the Champions, Dirty 30, Vendettas, Final Reckoning, War of the Worlds 2, Total Madness, Double Agents, Spies, Lies, and Allies. The first ever critique of this newest season before we even saw the super trailer or any minute of the season was the name. What's with this name? Why Spies, Lies, and Allies? It sounds goofy. And not only that, but you're doubling down on this like serious theme. We're calling TJ the handler. We're having this weird format where we're doing spy stuff. We're in pairs, but we're not really in pairs because you can change team members whenever you want to. Also, when you're up there, you can pick anybody you want to, which lends itself to a predictable nature. People are already cautious about this season, and then adding so many layers to this season, the twist, being so heavy on the theme and the format rather than what's going on in the house and the players is what is really crushing the spirit of the longtime fan, because we never started watching the show because of how many explosions you can put into a challenge. We don't care about people calling TJ the handler. We didn't watch this show for people being tied up to a roof of a car and doing memory games. We watched this to see people being tested in ways we never thought they would. We were watching this for the cast of characters, because at the end of the day, what makes or breaks a season is the way the game is played and the people that make up the cast, and if they're likable, if we want to root for them, if they're good competition, if it's a season we want to rewatch, that's what's going to make us want to come back. Rivals 2 was a good season, but it was also following one of the most toxic seasons of the challenge. On top of the Ruins and the Island, I think Battle of the Seasons is right up there with being one of the most toxic seasons of the challenge, that people were willing to give Rivals 2 a chance because Rivals 1 was so good, and it was still a good season, but the two teams that won were so dominant that it became ultimately predictable as the season kept going to when we got to Free Agents. Free Agents was a good season, but it wasn't able to translate while the season was airing, and then X's 2 was such a bad misstep by the challenge by putting it on an 11 p.m. time slot that it kind of just snowballed into this like middling ratings, and they're a shell of what they used to be, to now audiences are conflicted on the product that we're getting in Spies, Lies, and Allies. But I think it's still salvageable, and I really wanted to make this video is to bring up these issues and what I've been seeing with the trends in the data, but I also wanted to bring up possible solutions of what could maybe bolster up those ratings a little bit more for next season and seasons to come. For the first solution I have is invest in these rookies. This season, bring them back on. Let's see them compete in a different format. Let's have them on for many more seasons that we can get invested in them. A lot of comments on my videos have mentioned that they like these batch of rookies. This is one of the best rookie classes we've had. We want to see them on more seasons and get invested. Let's see them on another challenge season. And speaking of next season, let's make next season a throwback format. Let's have an X's 3. Let's have a Rivals 4 and call it Rivals and X's. Let's not do this vendettas, final reckoning, bigger than life themes. They're not working. Let's go back to what people may know. Personally, I think a rival season after this season would be perfect. They've been enough fights on screen and enough tension with a lot of people that it could work and bring back the format of rivals where last place goes directly into the elimination. Now people can't just easily work with a vet alliance or a rookie alliance or having to just work with their best friends or being able to switch partners easily. Also make some phone calls to other vets from past seasons that we haven't seen in a while. But there are times where we just have the same vets over and over again. Let's invest in some rookies. Let's put some more investment in those past players that we haven't seen in a while, because I know there's some people sitting by the phone that will be willing to pick it up and come to do the challenge again. Yet they're not getting those phone calls because you're investing in these set of rookies right here. It's going to take some time and some help for not only bringing in a few other rookies for next season, maybe a little bit more Survivor players, a little bit less Big Brother players, bring on some past vets. I think it was a help for Amanda to come back for this season, but let's bring in some other players, shake up the cast a little bit, give some of these vets that we've seen for the past like 6 seasons in a row a break. Let's bring in some other players and let's really see a different season. Let's get that feel back. Let's really get into a season where we can sink our teeth into and really put a lot more onto the personalities and the players rather than making these bigger than life productions, bigger than life names. We don't need players to be on the side of a truck grabbing puzzle pieces to do a puzzle on top of the truck while it's driving around. This is the way I think we can get those steps back. Have a good rotation with your vets. Invest in these rookies. We don't need a huge batch of rookies for the next 2 seasons because you have so many rookies for this season. Because what you've been doing recently has not been working, but you've been doubling down every single time. It's like the challenge saw those spike ratings during the pandemic of double agents and total madness and kind of took away the wrong lessons from those seasons. And it's just like, no, don't do that. Go back to basics next season and the season afterwards, and let's get this thing going. I think that's exactly what the challenge needs and what could start building up the audience and the ratings from the ashes of what is now Spies, Lies, and Allies. And I mean, I'm saying all this after episode 6, where after this episode, we could see a huge spike and this could be the best rated season in the past like 8 seasons. But I highly doubt that from where things are going and the trajectory of this season. And I just think that we need a complete overhaul. Maybe even take a longer off-season break from this season to next season, because I think the past few seasons, especially the ones from the pandemic, they wanted such a quick turnaround because they didn't know how long we would be in lockdown. They wanted to give us new content for not only our sake, but I think for their sake, to keep on getting those ratings bump from everybody just sitting at home not having anything to watch. But now that we do have things to watch and people are choosing not to go and watch the challenge while it's airing, it's a huge thing. Like, there was nothing on. There was nothing on and you had more viewers than ever in the past few seasons, yet you couldn't retain them for the next season or 2 seasons after that one. You couldn't retain them, and that is a huge red flag in my opinion. I don't know. Those are the options and solutions that I feel would really help out the challenge, get those boosts, and get a little bit more fandom as we're moving on to the near future and building upon to what could be the next 10 years of the challenge, if we're going to get the next 10 years of the challenge. And then of course season 40 has to be something huge and shell out the money for old school versus new school with an all-stars type of feel season, because that's where it's going to be. That's what's going to bring back the younger viewers and the newer viewers. But you need to start building up on season 38, season 39, have old school versus new school or champs only or something to that effect. And then once you move past that to hit into the 40s, at least you have some building blocks moving into those seasons. But You have to start now. Like, this season 37 is already edited, it's already on the books. You need to start moving on to what's going to happen in the next seasons and seasons prior, and you have to make season 40 something huge to try to get all those ratings drummed up heading into the next era of the challenge. But I think that's what could be a nice quick and long-term solutions could be for the challenge. But what do you think about everything I mentioned in this video? What do you think about the ratings? What do you think is the real problem that's happening for the challenge? And do you think that they can have that upturn? What do you think is the solutions or the next step that the challenge should take to regain some of those ratings and viewership that they used to have? Let me know that in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. While you're down there, hit that like and subscribe button. I'll be back really soon with more Challenge 37 content, more challenge content, more content in general. But until then, peace.